So I had the opportunity to hear our next speaker, Jessica Hilburn, at the ARSL conference in Massachusetts last fall. And my notes say, and I literally dug them out this morning, they say, great presentation, lots of good ideas. I heard about a ton of new places to get community data. Jessica is going to share it all with us this afternoon. Although Jessica serves as the executive director of the Benson Memorial Library in Pennsylvania and the CEO of the Crawford County Federated Library System, I think my favorite thing about her is that she is also the chair of her county planning commission and is an elected official on her borough council. So to me, she embodies the idea of that embedded librarian, and just imagine the good relationships that she is able to achieve. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Becky. That's very nice. I'm so excited to be doing this with you today and to have been asked to give you this information. So there's a ton in here that I have. I also provided my slides to Sam so that all of the links that I'm going to show you, you'll be able to go through and click through them and look at all the stuff for yourself. So Becky gave a great overview of who I am, but I am in I'm in a rural public library in northwestern Pennsylvania. I also oversee the 9-library federated library system for my county. In Pennsylvania, our libraries are majority nonprofit, so we're not actually government affiliated, so that's a little different than a lot of other states. In addition, I'm the chair of my county planning commission. I'm on borough council. I've written a lot of grants using the data that I'm going to show you today. But I did want to do a slight caveat of my presentation was developed before a lot of the political stuff that's going on right now. So I don't know how that is going to change the information I'm going to give you, but I'm going to give it to you and then we'll have to navigate it together. So I just wanted to start out by asking you guys some questions. So do you ever feel like your library, your town, or your area, your county, any of those things is getting left behind? And not just in the national sphere, but in even state or regional conversations, that maybe because of your specific situation that the issues and needs that you're seeing in your community are not being heard or addressed. A great way to tackle that is through data. And pulling on those ideas, I really want you to think big. So if you could tackle a big or an expensive, a daunting project at your library, what would that be? And you're welcome to put your answers in the chat. I'll be really interested to hear about them later when we get through this and I'm able to look at it. But I think the bigger you think, the more that the data you pull can be applied to a variety of different areas. So some things that usually come to the top of people's heads are accessibility renovations of their buildings. I've seen a lot of libraries start different food insecurity programs, seed programs. Lots of people need new roofs. And also a big trend right now in libraries as well is hiring a social worker. So we're dealing with a lot of different types of issues that might not have been as prevalent in the past, and they don't necessarily teach you how to do in library school or in your typical training at a library. So how can we sort of fill those gaps in our communities? So assembling and analyzing data on your library and community will maximize your impact. You knew that because it's part of the title of my presentation. But it also can help you bring in more funding, shows your commitment to decision makers, and structures your successes to be buildable and multiply. So we want to be able to help do the things that matter without feeling so burnt out, because there is so much information all the time. How do we navigate that in a way that is both successful for what we're trying to do, but also isn't just wearing us down all the time? So you don't have to be everything for everyone. I know that there are so many problems to tackle. It can often feel this way. I don't know where to start because there is so much to go through, or I'm not doing enough. If you don't know who you're not serving or where the gaps are, that's an opportunity, not a weakness. So if you've ever done like a SWOT analysis, you want to make sure you're thinking of those things as an opportunity for the future, whether that is, right now we could do something about it in the midterm or in the long term. It's not a weakness that you're not doing those things. It truly is an opportunity for. Also, stopping doing something does not mean it is or you are a failure. So not everything works all the time. Sometimes you just haven't found the right audience. Sometimes maybe it'll work differently in 5 years. Maybe it used to work really well, but it doesn't work so well anymore. Admitting that that thing doesn't work anymore does not mean that it was a failure. It's just part of the evolution of library service. And when you plan for the future, it doesn't mean that you have to do every single thing that you come up with. And if you don't tackle every single thing on your list, well, then I failed to do what I set out to do. That's not true. You will find the things that are most meaningful. And data will help you evaluate where you are now, where you could go, but it's up to you to turn that information into actionable knowledge. So the information that's going to be provided to you through the various areas isn't actual knowledge until you formulate that and figure out what you're going to do with it in operation. So what I'd like you to take away from today is new ways to tap into your community. So sometimes it feels like we know who's in our community, but that's not always the case. There could be constituencies out there that you aren't aware of or you haven't identified yet. We also want to know how to find and compile that impactful data for evaluation, grant writing, all those different things. You want to be able to feel more comfortable letting things go, trying new things, uncovering new funding avenues, and building relationships. And that's something that I've used data in my life a bunch of, making sure that the library is embedded in the community, like Becky mentioned. I'd also like to help you find an excitement for how the data can actually make your library better and your life easier, because that would always be helpful. And last but not least, I want this presentation to be a resource for you so you can revisit it as you need it. Maybe I'm going to look at this slide today or try out this link tomorrow or whatever it is. It's all on your schedule. So, as we said, data helps you tell your community story, understand your strengths, your opportunities, where your time could be better invested, support your request for funding, because a story is great, but a story is even better when you can back it up with some numbers. How you can tailor or change your services to meet your community needs. But we're also librarians and library workers, and we just don't want any old information. We just don't want to hop on Google and find whatever's there. We want the good quality stuff. So I wanted to start with the best, and that's the American Community Survey. So I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this already. It's what I call the big daddy of data. It's where so much is, but the American Community Survey can quickly become overwhelming. There is more recent information in the community survey than in decennial census data. So you're probably familiar with, every 10 years they do the census, they release that information. But the American Community Survey is done more often. And it's pulling information on demographics, some of the ones that I've listed here. One that's very applicable to libraries, of course, is digital equity. So do the people in your service area have computers at home? Do they have internet access? And what kind of internet access do they have? Are they mostly using the internet on their cell phone or on their tablet, or do they have a desktop computer? All of those are really important to understanding what services we're providing and if we're providing them in the right way. Especially, I know everybody's probably gone on a website that looks very different on the desktop versus on your mobile phone. And if it's not really feasible to navigate it on the cell phone, and 90% of the people in your service area are accessing the internet on the phone, that could be a place where, well, maybe the library can help out somewhere here. Also, if you live in a small area, you want to make sure to use the 5-year estimate, or no data may show up for you. So when I first started using the American Community Survey, I was like, this is not useful for me. My area is too small. They don't have any information. Well, that wasn't accurate. I just wasn't clicking the right drop downs because they're not the most intuitive. So I do have an example to show you how to do that. You also can use what they call the geos to compare your area to your county, your state, or even national statistics. And that helps to build a case, especially when you're grant writing or you're talking to stakeholders or funders. It shows how is your area different than everywhere else, and how could we then address those. So here's an example of the American Community Survey. This is actually for my area where I live and my library is. So when I bring up American Community Survey and I say I want to see poverty status in the past 12 months, there's data not available. Well, I know that that's not true. I know there's data available. So how do I get it to come up? So if you see this screen, you just have to make sure you got to click in the right places. So you want to click right here, which is actually a drop down, and then you'll get your ACS, American Community Survey, 5-year estimate subject tables. you want to make sure that's what you're on if you're not getting any data the first time when you pull that up. You can also click over here in this geos area, and that's what's going to get you your comparative table. So you can compare your direct place. So for me, that's the city of Titusville, which city is quite the word. We are technically a city under the definition of a city, but we have like 5,000 people. So then you can compare that to the county or other places. Other than the American Community Survey, which has data in a variety of different areas, I also wanted to give you some other options topically. So the first topic is economic and poverty data. This is customized specifically for you guys in Iowa a little bit. So the first one is the Iowa Open Data Dashboard. If you haven't looked at this yet, I would really highly suggest it. Each state has a version of this, but for Iowa, you have data sets on unemployment payments, economic indicators, per capita income, lifeline disbursements. So these are telecom payments for subsidized phone and internet. So that's going to give you some good information. Wage data, this is broken down by county and even local area for Iowa. So I would really suggest just taking a little time and seeing what you can find in there and what's useful for you. And they make it really clear when it's last been updated. So, you know, am I getting the most recent data, or am I getting something that's a little too old and maybe isn't what exactly I'm looking for? Another great place is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So in this one, I suggest searching for your area or your county to see what's available. Depending on the size of where you are, you'll have to figure out which one is going to give you the correct information that's applicable. The IRS also has some interesting statistics. Sometimes you think of the IRS and you were just giving them all the information, but they also have open data that they provide, such as individual income tax return statistics by zip code, which can be interesting when it comes to income data. It's just a different way to look at it than some of the other reports. There's also the Social Security Administration, which gives some data about SSI recipients. This is usually broken down by state and county. And then of course, the data is anonymized, but it shows you the amount of the payments, the age group of the people who are receiving them, and different areas there, as well as earnings and employment data for workers who are receiving Social Security and Medicare by count. And finally, in the economic and poverty area, there's the USDA Economic Research Service, the Atlas of Rural and Small Town America. So I know, just like Pennsylvania, you guys in Iowa have a lot of small towns and rural areas as well. So I thought this might be really useful for you, where you can download data sets for your county and area on a variety of topics. And this one I really like, in addition to that open data dashboard, just going in and playing with and seeing what you can find, because there's a lot of good information. So I have some examples for you to show you what these look like, so you know you're in the right area when you go looking for them. So this is the Iowa Open Data website. This is an example of one of the economic data sets. So you can see it's annual personal income for the state of Iowa by county and year, and it was last updated toward the end of last year, so it's pretty recent information. This is an example from the USDA's Economic Research Service. For this one, I picked out a county in Iowa. This is Lynn, Iowa, and to show what the population change is over time. So you can see down here in the legend what the different colors mean. If there's been an increase in population, it stayed relatively the same, or there's been a decrease. But also in these maps and these data sets, when you go into them, make sure you're scrolling down in the information as well, because more than just the current value, there's other information in here, like people with a 4-year degree and the timeline where that information was collected. So that's some good information, and you can actually download the data sets for the county. So then in an Excel or in a Google Sheet, you can go through and even get more granular into what you want to look for. Next is community social factors and their data. So again, I suggest the Iowa Open Data Dashboard. In this type of information, there's some good stuff about reading proficiency by school district and grade level. So if you're doing a lot of literacy work in your community with kids of different grade levels, this would give you some good information, as well as graduation rates. How might the library be able to help the school district tackle that? Might that be an interesting partnership for you? Again, with Medicaid recipient figures, food assistance programs, veteran residents. all those different areas and different kinds of people and their needs that might be in your community that you either know about or maybe you've learned something more about. Another one I like is called Opportunity Insights. There's a lot of different stuff on here as well. I know I'm going to say that a bunch, but this looks at social capital, migration, economics. It shows you an opportunity atlas at the zip code and neighborhood level of information, and I'm going to show you an example of that. So what this is talking about is people in your community, if they're leaving, they're going and they're moving somewhere else permanently, where are they going? If people are coming to your community, where are they coming from? Are there any trends in those areas? Might we be able to have services that target those different kinds of migration? And it also looks at economic connectedness, civic engagement, like I said, mobility, and economic forecasting, which I find very intriguing because at the neighborhood level, for a lot of areas, it can help forecast depending on what kind of household you come from, what the economic status of that household is. If you stay and you live in that area, where might you be so many years from now? Which could be extremely interesting to your decision makers and stakeholders. Next is the civil rights data collection. So this has information on school district level profiles. So it's going to talk about things like bullying, how many students in that school district have disabilities, how many students have to repeat grades, are there being a lot of suspensions, what's the student to teacher ratio, are there a lot of kids and not a lot of teachers, are kids getting enrolled in preschool? I mean, if they're not, versus how many preschool age kids live in your area, is the library providing some preschool options for those patrons who might be involved in that or might be interested in that age group, things for that age group. And also how often law enforcement is involved at the school district. Interestingly enough, the Environmental Protection Agency also has some pretty cool information on community social factors. One I really love, and I'm going to show you, is walkability, but they also have information on public transit, transportation, and lastly is migration patterns. So as a kind of like a double feature with Opportunity Insights, migration patterns help shows where people are going in and out, and you can look at those two types of information and sort of compare and contrast them. I also wanted to mention the housing and urban development here in CDBG, but I'm going to talk about that later in the presentation. So if you don't know what that is, that's okay. Just hold tight and we will talk about it here. So here's an example of your Iowa Open Data site. This is the Food Assistance Program Statistics by month and county. This was really recently updated in January of this year. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but when you scroll down on these pages, you're able to download the entire data set. So you don't have to look at it in here. You can look at it on your own, on your local computer, and then manipulate that data, which by that I just mean, do you want to sort it by whatever kinds of headings they have in there? Do you want to see by area, by type of assistance, by age of people who are being served, whatever that may be. This is an example of Opportunity Insights projected income based on specified characteristics. For this one, I chose Waterloo, Iowa for an example for you, and you can see that down to the census tract and neighborhood level, you can click on all these areas and it will show you what the trend is for those specified characteristics. So for example, in this one, for this tract that I chose, which was all of Waterloo, the household, we're looking at household income at age 35. If it's red, it's lowest, and if it's blue, it's highest. And I have it based on in the upper right-hand corner, you can see what factors you're choosing to show what the projection would be. So in this case, we're saying that the parent income was low, child was of any race, and the child was of any gender. And you can change all of these, and it will show you what the forecast is depending on those factors for those different areas. This is an example of the EPA's Walkability Index. So I just chose an area of Iowa here to show you. These orange areas are the least walkable, which is probably your more rural areas, which would make sense. Yellow is below average, but slightly better than the orange. Your light green is above average, and your dark green is most walkable, which is usually going to be in your downtown. But if you're ever having experiences with people saying, I'm really having trouble getting to the library, I can't find transportation, it's too far to walk, the terrain is challenging, whatever that may be, these types of maps could be useful in having the library be a partner with any sort of transportation organizations or government bodies that are working on transportation in your area to say, hey, walkability isn't just, and transportation aren't just an issue in general, but they're also an issue for the library. Can people get to the library safely? And is that impeding their use of the services that you're working so hard to provide? Next is the migration pattern. So I chose Storm Lake, Iowa for this one. And you can click into the county, and then down here at the bottom, you'll see the legend. So by color, it's young adults who moved, and then the young adults who did not move. So if we're looking at this county, the Storm Lake, Iowa, 41% of young adults did not move out of the county, but depending on where they moved, you can see the shading of the counties that people moved to. So other places in Iowa, of course, make sense. They are those darker blue colors. People are moving just elsewhere in the state or in the areas and surrounding states. But you can also see that people are moving to Washington, D.C. They're moving to California or Arizona or Washington. So these patterns could be really interesting depending on what you're looking at. Take a little breather. And then the next is health data. So the first one I wanted to show you is the Centers for Disease Control. They, I'm going to say it ad nauseum, they have so much information. So just give yourself a chance to wade through it, but also it's easy to get overwhelmed when you look at some of this stuff, but just do like one little piece at a time. You don't need to know everything about everything all the time. Two different things that they offer that I did want to highlight for you are the Social Vulnerability Index. So if people are in specific areas with specific factors, are they more socially vulnerable than others? Should programs, services, library outreach maybe be targeted more in these areas? And I have some examples of those. There's something also called PLACES data, and PLACES is all in all caps is an acronym, and this is the social determinants of health. If you've ever heard that phrase before, they are sleep, health, or sleep, disability, distress, social isolation, utilities, housing, food, internet, all those types of things are part of the social determinants of health. So if you can't be expected to be functioning well in society if your most basic needs aren't being met. And how does that break down based on who you are, where you live? And there is a lot of really robust information for Iowa in particular on these tools that a lot of other states don't have. So these tools will be great for you. Sadly, I don't get a lot of good information from them because Pennsylvania doesn't have great stuff on here, but Iowa is fantastic. There's also the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. These data sets are quite large, so I wouldn't suggest starting here. I would only suggest really getting into these if this is the path that you're going down anyway. They have Medicare enrollment, demographic breakdown, functional abilities of nursing home residents. And I know this probably sounds really niche, but if you're doing any kind of outreach or you're interested in doing outreach to your older residents, people who are living in nursing homes and maybe can't get to the library, what kind of abilities do they have? Are there a lot of people with vision disabilities? Do they have hearing disabilities? Is it more of a mobility issue? What kinds of resources, both like print, digital services, programs, what kinds of things might they enjoy depending on what they're able to do? And you can find some of that information here. There are also health resources, the Health Resources and Services Administration. So if you're very interested in this health data, it shows you medically underserved areas and the demographics of those areas and where there aren't enough health professionals based on how many people live there. I know that's definitely an issue where I live, and I'm sure in any rural area it's probably an issue. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, this is going to give you data on young adults and adult mental health, suicide rates, facilities for mental health services, what therapies are being used. so I wanted to make sure that we did highlight a part of health that wasn't just physical health, but was also mental health, because I know that the library can play a role there as well for people. The University of Wisconsin Center for Health Disparities Research. The University of Wisconsin is fantastic with both the information they have and the way they present it. It's really user-friendly. I would be surprised if you felt overwhelmed using this, just because the way that they break it down is easy to understand and to digest as you're reading it. So these different tools, both the Center for Health Disparities Research and the County Health Rankings and Roadmaps, they show you different neighborhood disadvantages, how your county compares to state and national averages in healthy places. And it breaks down a variety of different things like premature death, poor health days, which is an interesting factor all in and of itself, physical activity, alcohol, drinking, teen birth, how many people are uninsured, how many health providers there are per capita, are people completing education, things about income inequality and also pollution. So this is just a great place with a lot of easily digestible information. So some examples of this. This is an example of the CDC's Social Determinants of Health Places map. In this one, I chose the social isolation factor because I know I've seen come across my desk and in my email a lot of reports and webinars about social isolation being on the rise, being much higher now than it's been in the past in the United States, and how libraries are able to play a role in bringing people together in the community, or at least offering a place where they can find some connectedness. So in this case, I, of course, have a soft spot for any county named Crawford, since that's also my county. So I chose Crawford County, Iowa, for the example of what this would look like. So for the social isolation map, there was the prevalence of feeling socially isolated among adults over 18 years old was 36.1 with a 95% confidence interval based on the population here. So they're feeling more social isolation in this area than they may be in others. And this is also done by color. So those lighter colors are reporting less feelings of social isolation than those darker colors. In this area, you can also, you can see up top here, you can break it down into different areas. So you can see the rates of food stamps, food insecurity, housing insecurity, utility threats, social support. And then above that, those are just the ones that are under health-related needs. You can also get into disability, at-risk behaviors, other social determinants of health. All of this is very clickable, and you can just move through it at your own pace. This is an example of the University of Wisconsin's county health rankings and roadmaps. So this one was for health incomes to tell us how long people live on average in a community. So Iowa is a really healthy state when it comes to how long people live on average. So you can see down here that the least healthy in the United States are more of this like mustard color, whereas the healthiest are in the green range, and y'all are all in the green range. So that's actually pretty great. But if you want to get into it and see, well, why might my county be lower than my neighbor or something like that? Is there something that we can address there? You can get into it on here. Next, food data. So I know a lot of libraries are doing more and more food programs, food outreach. A lot of libraries are the place in the community where kids get free lunches in the summer. Like I mentioned earlier, doing seed programs and things like that. So I wanted to highlight some here, including Feeding America. They have rates on food insecurity, how many people in your area are getting SNAP benefits, how much does the average meal cost where you live? Is it significantly higher than your neighboring counties, than your neighboring states? You know, what's causing that issue? How might there be advocacy to be done there? There's also the reinvestment fund. This shows you areas of inequitable access to healthy and fresh food. So if you've ever heard of a food desert, there's also food swamps. So a food swamp is where there's access to food, but it's just fast food. It's just pre-processed and pre-packaged food. It's it's the gas station, or it's Dollar General, which we all have if we live in rural areas. So is there actually access to fresh and healthy food in certain areas? This also has statistics on neighborhood market value, fair housing, early childhood education, just how all those factors come together when it comes to people being able to feed their families. And lastly, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service. This is showing the number of meals that are being served, nutrition support, access, WIC participants, and WIC eligibility. If you've never worked with WIC at your library to do a partnership or a program, or even just to offer information, that's a really good place to start in this area as well. They're usually really willing to have those partnerships because you're already serving their clientele when it comes to demographics, age groups. So it's a good partnership. A lot of this data is state level, but you can still use this to make a case or at least to start a conversation. Here's an example of feeding America's food insecurity amongst the overall population. In this case, I used Hancock County, Iowa, and the food insecurity rate is 10.7%. You can see, again, with the different colors of the counties here, if there's a slightly lower, slightly higher food insecurity rate. You know, in a perfect world, we'd have 0% be food insecure and everyone would be fed appropriately, but that's not the case. So you can see how many, the percent of people below the SNAP threshold, and then the average meal cost in that area. And then something that I find interesting too, as a talking point, is the additional money required to meet food needs. You know, how much money would need to be raised to meet the food needs of the people who are food insecure in that county? And you can see that dollar figure. Not that that is possible necessarily, but more that it's a way to, you know, have these conversations with how is the library a partner in this? How can we be part of the solution, not be the one that solves the problem, not be the one that takes on more than we can handle, but, you know, how can we see this problem, how do we be part of the solution? This is a map from the Reinvestment Fund, and it's showing limited supermarket access designations. So this data is from 2022. And if it's in a yellow area, it is not an LSA area, meaning it does not have limited supermarket access. It doesn't have that designation. If it is dark purple, it is a limited supermarket access area. That kind of medium purple is low access and low population, and then that lightest purple is low access and low density. So not as many people are living there, but it's also low access. So this you can scroll in on with the link and look at your area and see where there are some issues reported with access to supermarkets. So you have all of these links. You have all these things to look at. What do you do with it? The first one I wanted to highlight was internal evaluation. So are you currently offering the types of services your community needs? You know, sometimes it's a program that we really like, you know, that maybe it's not what we need right now. Maybe we need to have just a little bit of reflection to see where we are, where we're going. If you're not offering it, do you have the funding to do it? Maybe you don't, and that's a different talking point. Are you currently offering the types of programs your community members need, and are your programs addressing issues in your community or filling gaps? You know, my library offers a lot of craft programs, and my question is, you know, is this addressing an issue in my community? And it is, because it's bringing people together that otherwise are not really getting an opportunity to talk to other people, wouldn't have the funds to do some of these things on their own, and they're creating connections through the library. So even something as simple as a craft program, you can expand in the way you speak about it to show how you're addressing those issues in your community. So for example, I wanted to give you a way you could operationalize something like this. So looking at all of this data, you identify that your community has a high social isolation score. So what are some of the ways the library can facilitate adults interacting in social settings? Or you identify that your area is a food desert. Could you partner with your county food bank or have programs about starting a home garden maybe? Those are different ways that you can use that data to then see how are we addressing this inside the library. But also, you can use this with grants and stakeholders like I've talked about. So you found a need, you have an idea, you decided you have the bandwidth to tackle this, but now what do? You use it to build a case for funding that idea and addressing the issue that you've identified. So elected officials they can be moved by a story, emotionally, but when you back it up with data, there's always going to be a better chance that you might actually get some dollars because of it. We always want to personalize our statistics. So you never kind of want to have one without the other when you're starting to make a case. You find a statistic, make that into a narrative. You have a narrative, find some data to back up that story. You want to make a specific ask. Probably the worst thing that you could do is have this amazing pitch to an elected official, and then you don't actually ask them for anything. You just told them this great story, and then they say, okay, great, I'm so glad you talked to me, goodbye. You want to ask for something, or else you're not going to get anything. And you can start small, but think big. Like I said in those early slides, be thinking about, the big picture, and then you can chip away at it in smaller ways. So, for example, you identify that your county or area lacks access to health professionals. How can the library help address this problem? Maybe through telehealth space, or access to the internet, access to Medicare or Medicaid professionals. You can use that data you've collected and the idea you've come up with to address it to create a request narrative. So I'll just show you this example here. So a robust public library with resources and programs for people in need creates a healthier community. That can be your basis for what you're saying. You use statistics that you've gathered on Medicare, Medicaid, medically underserved, all these different areas, and then talk about how investing in the library as a community asset open to all people is a responsible use of taxpayer dollars. You're not discriminating in any way. Anybody can come use what you have to offer them regardless of their financial status, ability to pay, whoever they are. And then you ask for something small to start, because even a small investment can create huge returns over time. You also want to make sure you keep decision makers in the loop on your progress and success, and then step up the ask next time. Ask for a little bit more. Ask again. Don't stop asking. And when something is successful, you want to thank them publicly and frequently, because elected officials like attention. I don't think I'm going to offend anybody by saying that. They do. So saying thank you for the way that they have helped make something happen is going to make them feel good and make them remember you. So I mentioned earlier about CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant. You do have these in Iowa, every state does. So I dug a little bit into how this works for you guys, and it's pretty much how it works for us as well. The funding, of course, is distributed to communities of low and moderate incomes. It has to be at least 51% of the community. These programs always prefer partnerships, leveraging funds, building community assets. There is a lot of red tape with this funding, but it puts you on their radar. If you are a part of the government with your library, then you want to, of course, work with your municipality on these things. But if they don't already realize that this funding can be used for libraries, this is a way to open that conversation, because libraries are neighborhood facilities and they have a specific HUD code for CDBG, which I listed here. There's other codes for more specific projects, so just starting that conversation is a great way. In my experience, we have used CDBG, or in the process of using my municipality CDBG, to put in accessible doors in my library for the bathroom. Another library in my system has had foundation repair, and these funds were also used to help get us fiber internet. There's also program grants. A lot of municipalities, their planning offices have mini grants or program grants. Just check out their website, see what they have. I mean, they might not have anything, it doesn't hurt because you still got a chance to look, but you might stumble across something you didn't know about. And if no opportunities seem readily apparent, this is your opening to get your voice in the room. Because in my experience, opportunities only exist because people lobby for them. So until I was on my county planning commission, people didn't really think about the library that much. The people that were on there weren't big library users. So by getting that library voice in the room, to not dominate the conversation necessarily, but to insert the library in the conversation where appropriate, where we could be of use that they might not have thought of us before. Even having our meetings more publicly in the public library, which we now do, has made a difference. So showing decision makers, not just elected officials, but just people in decision-making roles, how the library can help further the things they already want to be doing while also addressing a challenge for the library. So taking a look at what's listed in their comprehensive or strategic plan and seeing how the library can help realize their goals together gets you on their radar. So you always want to put your data to work. Even if you're not yet comfortable or able to have these conversations with those elected officials or those higher level stakeholders, talk to your board, your staff. If you don't have time for a full presentation, make a short handout. Canva is great. Put some of those statistics you found in there, make it into a story that something that tells a story. That's still worthwhile to have. Something that's worked well for us is running a countywide initiative for local or National Library Card Month. Just get some eyeballs on the library, getting some of those people in just for a few minutes to get a library card, take their picture, whatever they're willing to do to get them interested in your information. Also helps to go to their meetings. So go to a council meeting with a handout about the library. Put a face to the library's name. It's not just an idea. It's not just an organization. It's certainly not just a building. It's you, and it's your staff, and it's the people who use the library. You also can learn about what boards and authorities are controlled by your municipality. Show up to their meetings. Chances are nobody ever comes to their meetings from the public unless something real crazy is going on. So just by being there, you're showing that you care, and that automatically elevates you in their eyes. Also, if you haven't been in the past, I highly suggest being a part of your municipality's next comprehensive plan effort. So they have to be updated every so many years, depending on the law. So getting involved in this can be really useful. Because if something's happening in your community, construction, rehabilitation, programming, whatever it is, chances are it was in a plan somewhere first, because usually people and organizations don't like to fund things that haven't been proven that they need to happen. So the best way to get money is to make sure that foundations of your idea are somewhere in a plan. The whole thing doesn't need to be fleshed out in there, but just enough to make that connection. So what do these look like for libraries? How does this go together? So every state has a law that enables or requires local planning activities. The link here that you'll have in the handouts will take you right to what Iowa requires. You can see in the map here that Iowa's been classified as having a medium level of poor planning laws that guide what goes on. Plans are mostly about existing conditions, current challenges, future development, where are we going over the next 5, 10 years. Iowa does require its counties and cities to adopt the plan, which means that those people, the local elected officials do have to have buy-in. So if there's something that the library can help with in that plan and they've adopted it, you've already got somewhere to go with that talking point. Community planning also helps promote resilience, the evolutionary nature of libraries. We are not static, we are not the same all the time, and it allows our mission to align with those local challenges and solutions. Our backbone, our foundation is information. And how can we help everyone else understand that information, data, the same thing in this case, can create tangible positive change? That the very thing that we do is useful to a positive and a good future in wherever we're living. So I wanted to give you an example in my community. So these are some of the actionable goals from the 2024 to 2034 comprehensive plan for my county, Crawford County, Pennsylvania. And then I went through and just figured out how could the library even help with some of these things. So with Healthy Hearts and Homes, can the library offer telehealth-based Wi-Fi? Can we partner with food organizations? Could we offer outdoor programming? With a ready-to-work labor force, could we do something with job fairs or skills workshops? We have something called Career Link, so we can upskill people, connect them with jobs and businesses. Is there a local, how to create a small business pamphlet in your area? What kind of laws govern small businesses? What kind of permits do they have to have? Having that information all in one place, is that somewhere where the library could create that handout and then have it available? Do you have books in the employment areas popular in your community that might be of interest to people? The same with community prosperity. Do you have information about first-time home buying or home rehab? Different ways you partner with local businesses as well. If there's population decline in your area, like there is in mine, healthy libraries equal healthy communities. People want to go live in a place that is vibrant and that they feel welcome. The library is a key part of that. The municipality should be investing in a place where people want to live, and the vast majority of people want to live in a place with a good public library. Also, if they're doing any sort of like resident attraction, make sure they're promoting the library in that. We have great parks, we have great trails, we have opportunities for jobs, we have a great library. That's interesting for people. And lastly, recreation for all. So libraries are a recreational resource. We provide recreational reading, watching, all kinds of things that people just like to do for fun. How can libraries be those entertainment things as well that are enriching people's lives? So we want to be spokespeople for these things. We're really good at providing solutions for people's problems. There's like the saying is a book for every reader, but the same, we can give a referral for a night shelter, but we're not always great at explaining the multidimensional nature of our service to the people who can support us. We are doing the work all the time, but we also have to be talking about doing the work. And showing people how the programs and services are reflecting the needs that are identified. So data is helping us craft what to say to communicate needs to stakeholders. You want to be one of the voices that steers the future of your community. Somebody's going to do it, so why not you? Engaging in your community is part of your library's mission because your library is in your community. And I have this link here so you can find out more about planning in your state. This is your state planning organization just to see what they're doing, what's going on. And I also linked a website here to show a survey of your state planning laws specifically for Iowa. And I would suggest checking out your town, borough, county, city, their website. If they don't have a great one, give them a call and ask. They probably haven't been asked in a long time and it might be new for them. Connecting data with the library, with planning, with your community will help both open doors and demolish walls that may have existed for a long time. So that is everything I have for you. I hope that everything I've provided is of use to you in some way. I have my contact information here. If you ever have a question and want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to talk about all these things. And I would love to hear your questions if you have any. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jess. As I'm writing notes down here, wow, didn't I tell you guys that she had a ton of new places to get information? The first time I heard this, I was just, like I said, blown away with the places that are out there that I had no idea about. And I've been doing data stuff for years and years. So that was really exciting for me. We had a couple of questions come in. The first one was right away in the beginning as you were talking about nonprofit libraries. So not exactly related to your presentation, but the question was, how do you get funding if you're a nonprofit library?
Yeah, it's tough. So specifically in Pennsylvania, the way that public libraries are funded is we have what's called the public library subsidy, which comes from the state. So that's part of our funding. It's not supposed to be a large part. And we also are expected to do most of it locally. So in my county, we have a local millage on our property tax, which helps fund the library. Not every county is like that. Ours was made in the 80s. So we are fortunate in that realm, but a lot of libraries, nonprofit libraries, are operating on very thin margins because we do not have a great amount of state funding or like anything like that.
Yeah, that's interesting and getting harder, I imagine. It would be really tough to get that millage added now at this late. I'm
Yeah,
sure that
and
would be.
it's getting harder and harder, especially if you live in a rural or an economically disadvantaged area to do that local fundraising. So
Sure.
yeah, there's a lot of that. We have a specific like niche in Pennsylvania. I think that every time I talk about it to people from outside of Pennsylvania, they're always like, "Oh, wow, what is that?" So I'm not surprised by the question.
All right. And then another question came in from Marianne. How user-friendly are these sites? Her next point is it as easy to find the info as you made it look?
That's a completely fair question. I would say it varies. Some of them you can tell have put a lot of time and effort into making them user friendly. Um, some of them not so much. I would say the ones that come from the federal government are more difficult to navigate than the ones that are coming from organizations that are offering open data. Um, I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with kind of finding what you need. But for a lot of data sets, it's not like there's just one place to find the information. You might be
Right.
able to find the same thing somewhere else that's made in a more digestible format. So I would say if one gets too overwhelming for you, you're probably not missing the critical part, and you'll be able to find it
Someplace else. And I don't think sometimes pull from the same place. You know, a lot of the data that some of these sites are putting out is actually coming from that American Community Survey piece. And
yeah.
so they're all kind of parsing it out in different ways. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Um, the last one, then, I think you addressed a little bit, especially towards the end, but she's asking for examples of how you used some of those data sets to support or impact your library then. Do you have any other
Yeah,
examples for us?
the one that comes to mind most quickly, it has to do with internet connectivity. So in my area, we have particularly poor internet connectivity across the county. It's one of those places where I know this happens all over the country where the ISP doesn't want to come down the rural road because there aren't enough people to pay for the internet once they string the very expensive line. So they just say, well, we're not coming. So a way that we were able to use some of the data that we pulled about, the number of people who don't have home access to the internet, statistics, internal statistics at the library, how many people are actually using our internet, whether it's Wi-Fi, desktop computers, and also how people are accessing it. So that part that I mentioned about do people have desktop computers? Are they using their smartphones? Those types of things. Compiling all that information to say we really need an investment in better internet because our people don't have it at home. They're using it at the library, and it's not good enough to do what we need it to be doing. And that's how we were able to help make a case for using, at the time it was part of the Community Development Block Grant ARPA funds to make a partnership with both 3 different local governments, a nonprofit, and one of our ISPs to invest in getting fiber internet to all 9 of our libraries. And the libraries themselves, we paid nothing, $0. It all came from our partners because of the case we were able to make and then the partnerships that came out of making that case.
And that goes back to the two things that you really talked about was those partnerships and the community engagement piece as well as using that data. So now I've got another question here. She said, I'm looking to find out about all the households in my small town. Is the community survey going to help with that? And I'm not sure if you want, let's see, I can't remember who that was. Elizabeth, if you've got more follow-up on that question, what types of information are you looking for in those households? Otherwise, Jess, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, without having more information, it depends on what you're looking for. When it comes to households, yeah, it depends on what data set you're looking at when it comes to households. If you have a specific question about what you want to know about those households, feel free to reach out to me and I'll see what I can help you find.
So she did just put into chat, I want to start by finding out the percentage of households that have a library card.
Oh, that's interesting. Percentage of households that have a library card. Um, I have an idea of how you could find that information. It would probably be, it would take more work than just going on and finding it. But you could take data sets from probably the American Community Survey would be the easiest place and compare it to your internal library card data. Obviously, you wouldn't be providing that to anyone else. You'd just be doing that as an internal audit. And breaking down the connections between the two. It's a very interesting question. Yeah, it would take a couple steps, but you could do it.
I'm also going to just throw in here, I know Alex in Fairfield did something similar to that, but he was really lucky to be able to work with a GIS person from the University of Iowa, and they were able to sort of overlay some maps. They were able to map out where their library card holders are by address, and then they were sort of able to overlap that with some other things. So yes, there are ways to do it, but it was a lot of work. And you needs more tools than sometimes what we all have access to as librarians. But your way, I think, would work. Like you said, a
And
little bit more work.
yeah, I wanted to make my presentation just about open access data. I didn't want to give you anything that you had to pay for, but there
Mhm.
is a paid tool called Policy Map. If anybody's familiar with
Oh,
that, it does have library data in it. So if you were able to pay for something like that, or maybe you're a consortium or something, or even, whoever is paying for the tool, they might have some information there. I'd have to go in and look to see.
yeah. Oh, that's good. Thank you. I think that was the end of the questions that I came across. There were a lot of sort of thank yous. I now have a lot more tools to help tell my library story when I'm always chasing funds. So that I think is absolutely one. Um, Let's see. And then Michelle says Savannah from Orange Boy can do that GIS mapping for you. And then she's talking about using that to do direct mail. So another way to sort of use that data that you gather. And I'll just sort of end up, and I know Sam probably has some things to finish off with here, but what I particularly liked, besides the wealth of places to go to get the data, is your connection back to that library use. How you were able to tie it back to this is the impact that it can make in my library. The other thing is in large towns, a lot of the sites that you talked about, they've got city staffers that are doing that. They're out there looking at that walkability rating. But in our small towns, those city councils or city staff don't even know that exists. So for the librarian to come in and make them aware of some of those resources, I think is also a really useful tool to be able to do. So Sam has put in the chat the place to get the CE form, as well as to get back to the conference schedule so that y'all can get back to your next session. Otherwise, I think I am pretty well finished with that. So Sam, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to Jess. My favorite comment was from the person that was too busy taking notes to eat her lunch. So apologies if that was you, but we do have a little bit of break in the schedule now up until 1:30. So please join me in thanking Jess and again for throwing in those great examples from Iowa. I thought that was really helpful for us. I know I saw someone from Waterloo in here, so at least one of your examples, and I'm sure there were others too who recognized their town or their county in what you shared. So, our sincere thanks. Indeed, if this is the last session you're joining us for today, please do fill out the evaluation form. We want to hear from you. This conference is all about evaluation, so it makes sense that we better evaluate it. And if you are sticking around, head to the conference website to grab the link for our 1:30 breakouts. We will be hearing from um, Gary Kroeb at the State Data Center, actually. So that's going to be a nice follow-up to some of what Jessica talked about here. We're also going to talk with the WHOFI representative and Project Outcome, which is, I think, maybe been mentioned in every single session so far today. So it will be great to learn a little bit more about that tool as well if you haven't investigated it. So very fabulous list of resources, Jess, and the slides are posted. Thanks to Becky for hosting. We will see you all back at 1:30. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.